Well, good afternoon. And again, I too thank Sarah and Karen for inviting me to this illustrious symposium. And I also am very honored to be standing on the land of the Dakota and the Ojibwa. Sorry, pronounced that wrong. Been practicing it too. But I am honored to be standing on my indigenous native brothers and sisters. It's an honor. And he who owns the land owns the power. So just thinking about that and land acknowledgement from our first speaker this morning, it just becomes so acutely aware of how much land is important to us as people. So again, I'm going to kind of pick up, if you were here yesterday, I'm going to pick up a little bit from Marvin Anderson's presentation talking about the Rondo neighborhood. And I am a Rondo native, a baby, a child, an elder, junior now. And so Rondo is very important to me as a community. And again, talking about how land was stolen by a transportation development, I-94. So I'm going to not divert, but I've been here with some prestigious folk writing all kinds of books and articles and all that thing. But I'm going to talk about some grassroots foot soldier work around transportation and how it impacted a predominantly Black community. But then in the light of a new transportation, the light rail development in St. Paul, which was going to again threaten an already injured community, but not only the African community of folks that are left, because I-94 did disperse and displace many African-American people and families who could not return there to live. So my organization, Aurora St. Anthony Neighborhood Development Corporation, actually grew out of the aftermath of I-94 to look at how can we preserve the legacy, the history of Rondo, and do reconciliation, but also how can we recreate Rondo in some way. So I'm going to begin this presentation with a short video. It is called Rondo Beyond the Pavement. This is a short, just a trailer that is going to highlight 3 descendants of the Rondo community. This project was done by high school students from High School for Recording Arts, and the founder of that school is a Rondo native. And this is 3 really quick excerpts from 3 descendants from the Rondo community. So before I begin my PowerPoint, I just want to play this very short trailer. Yep.
When I saw the pictures of the devastation, my soul wept.
People lost their homes. Over 400 homes got lost.
My father lost his home.
All of my friends that lived across the street from me, all of their houses were gone.
I didn't really know what they were doing. I didn't really understand it all.
They had a scare tactic with a crane over one of the neighbors' homes.
The ball would come in, smash the house.
My parents were in the kitchen crying, and they told us that we had to move.
There were other routes.
They could have chose a better route.
There was a cohesiveness with the community prior to I-94. There were businesses, families looked out for one another.
We had a lot of kids and families that were tight-knit and they all watched each other.
That was the strength of the community.
We know who we are and who we came from. It helps us to go forward in our lives. If we know nothing about our history, then how are we to know about our future?
This debuts on this Saturday, but it's all sold out. So, but those of you who live in the state of Minnesota and the Twin Cities, they will be showing the full film. So am I ready to go? I'm not techie savvy either, so get me started.
If you want to just go use that for the next slide.
Okay. Okay, this talks about Rondo community past and present and future. And then it's, I'm going to end this PowerPoint. It is going to be highlighted the Stops for Us campaign, in which the alignment of the LRT down University Avenue, in particular on the St. Paul side, how it was aligned and how organizations such as mine, businesses, unions, and our leadership who actually didn't wanted to do it right this time, and using the experience from the Rondo community as the foundation of we don't want to repeat another Rondo. And again, in the Rondo neighborhood, it was very vital. We had, as Marvin talked about, over 800 houses and 100 plus businesses were lost. This shows an organization called the Crejavan. It was a group of African Americans who came together, formed a social club, but it became more than a social club, but they also had a credit union and they had a store. They provided scholarships and loans for African Americans when they couldn't get loans in the regular financial institutions. And again, this is another picture of I-94 after it had began. And this is what it looked like when it tore down my home, my uncles, my aunts, my friends, many people in our neighborhood, and this is what it looked like. And then the Way of the Central Corridor was planned. Here is the beginning of when the new light rail on University Avenue was being planned. And so this serves as the alignment of the line, but it also shows why the Stops campaign started. So by looking at this, if you look sort of where it says the western and central section, in that the stations are a mile apart. And that's the community in which I live, which is the most transit dependent. They were the most diverse, ethnically, culturally diverse in this neighborhood, but yet they were half a mile apart. So that meant we had to walk a mile apart to get to a stop. Plus the bus service was going to be cut, and your wait was going to be much longer. And if you look in the Minneapolis section and then the eastern section, which represents downtown St. Paul and actually here in the Minneapolis University of Minnesota campus as well, see the stops are like right on top of each other. And in the neighborhood, as I just talked about, they were a mile apart. So the Rondo community came together and said that we cannot repeat yesterday. And so we wanted to fight for equity, reparations, redress, the whole gamut to really protect our community, but also to see how our community could benefit from this light rail. So those three gentlemen you see across that picture, we call them the sons of Rondo. Peter Bell, at that time, was the Metropolitan Council chair. His mantra was on time, on budget, and the community engagement, just too much money in the budget. And then Nathaniel Kalik, he was the former chair of the NAACP at that time. And then Melvin Carter III, at that time, he was the city councilman. But today, a Rondo child, he's now the mayor of St. Paul. And then again, here we're talking about, here's once in a lifetime, there was going to $1 billion being invested in the neighborhood, and in the whole region. And so we wanted to learn from the mistakes of the past. It says 45 years here, but now it's roughly 50 plus years ago. And they did not want to repeat, as I said, what happened to the Rondo neighborhood. So we got together and we decided the light rail is not just for passing folk through, but it was actually to be built for the people. So in 2007, the Stops Coalition grew out of another advocacy group called the University Avenue Community Coalition. And we wanted to make sure that our communities had access to the light rail in St. Paul. So we came together, and it was an eclectic group of folk. We were very diverse, very opinionated, had our own agendas, but we decided to coalesce together and have one focus about addressing the 3 missing stations. So there's what they call at Western, Victoria, and Hamlin. On January 25th in 2010, we had a historic press conference, and it was held in our neighborhood in one of our organizations in our community. The Department of Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood came to the city to announce, because through all the work of our coalition, we were able to change what is called the Cost Effective Index, the CEI, and it meant that it would no longer determine the alignments of light rails, especially in urban communities where it's more densely populated, because the CEI was actually more for designing light rails in the suburbs. So you can see some of our politicians there. There's our former mayor, Rybeck. There's our county commissioner, Tony Carter, who is still, and then you can see Keith Ellison. There's also, again, Mayor Carter, because he is the mayor now, former mayor Chris Coleman, who was the mayor at that time. And then the Central Corridor Project, as it actually got developed through all of our organizing and putting up the good fight, as you see those sort of yellowish looking circles, those were the 3 missing stops that got added. So there was the Western, Victoria, and the Hamlin stations that got added to the alignment so that transit-dependent people could actually have equitable transportation. And then our story continues in terms of the Preserve Benefit Historic Rondo Committee was a coalition of just African Americans. It was co-founded by our organization along with the NAACP, several of the black businesses that were still in existence on University Avenue, plus citizens from the community. We came together and we at first filed what is called a Title VI complaint, stating that the Federal Transit Administration and the Met Council did not adequately analyze all the adverse effects on minority communities. And I'm going to quickly read this quote by Nick Khalid. Unless early on projections and benefits are intentionally put in place, its community, Rondo African American, and other low-income and minority communities will not be around to enjoy light rail and prosper from its economic and revitalizing boom. And then in January 2010, the Preserve Benefit Historic Rondo Committee, we actually filed a lawsuit around the same issues that were identified in the Title VI. Many people say, well, did you win? And the answer is yes and no. At least the federal judge recognized the impact of I-94 on the African American community. So in a way, that's an apology. But he did say to the Met Council that they had not adequately addressed the negative impacts of that will happen on the businesses along that corridor. So he had the Met Council go back and redo the analysis to see what would be the negative adverse impacts on the business community along that corridor. Because that corridor, there exists a lot of mom pop, culturally, ethnically small businesses along that corridor. And so the federal judge said that the Met Council needed to go back and redo that study. And when they did, they came back and said, oh, there's no adverse impacts that will happen. So the judge made them go back and do it again. So they went back and they did it again, and again they came back and they were saying it's not going to be any adverse. We can't see any adverse impacts. But the judge ruled in the Preserve Benefit Historic Rondos Committee's lawsuit that it would, and they needed to put some mitigation strategies and procedures in place to try to protect those businesses. Oops, went the wrong way. So, again, I talked about how the I-94 impact on the Rondo community actually was the foundation of how this new light rail should be built. And again, the mantra was, we will not repeat another Rondo. So it also, because most of the businesses along University Avenue were Asian-owned, the concerned Asian business owners came together and formed their own coalition. They also filed a Title VI complaint with the Environmental Protection Agency as well. And what we wanted in the, what we said in that, what were the recommendations that we wanted? Where, you know, at first it was that it should be adequately analyzed for the negative impacts. We wanted the 3 missing stops. We wanted to maintain bus service and maintain commercial and residential parking, because that corridor parking was something that was really, really needed in order for the businesses to be viable. And then we wanted to mitigate displacement of renters and homeowners. And then we wanted to maintain existing affordable housing and add new affordable housing. And then expand employment opportunities for community residents, and again, mitigate the division and isolation of our existing communities. Because with the I-94, and then with University Avenue, and then the light rail, our neighborhood cohesion would be split by 4 physical barriers. And there's already 3 that existed. And so now this would add a 4th one. And then this is all part of 2020 plan, this light rail, amongst other light rails, to this. There's a statewide region plan for creating other transportation projects. And then one of the most important things of the light rail was, or the premise, was that it was going to bring economic development to communities. So again, we wanted to make sure that the existing communities that were there and the people that are already here would also benefit from it. So in this picture, you see 2 developments at our organization. The top, to your top right, is our first multi-unit rental housing. And then the bottom left is another project called the Frogtown Square, which these 2 projects are on one of the main stops that was already in the alignment, that we got out ahead of the curve to make sure that there was affordable housing in this community. And then that bottom right picture is myself and some of the leaders in the neighborhood. We do a resident leadership program, And we organized residents from the grassroots up to really get educated about the development that was being proposed for this light rail, and so that they would have the skills and the knowledge to know about equitable development. And then that top left picture is Sean Donovan, and one of the small business owners that's in the Frogtown Square project, and he too is a Rondo baby, coming from the Rondo neighborhood. His grandmother did hair, and so she passed that knowledge down to him, but of course he expanded the knowledge, and he became a barber, and him and a young partner from the community opened up this barbershop business. And these are some sharp, smart African Americans. And so Sean Donovan was going through the country highlighting projects that should be developed on transit corridors. It's mixed use, what they call mixed use development, housing on the top, commercial on the bottom. So he actually visited our project as a model of doing equitable development. And last but not least, again, I talked about another project. This is done on one of the western stops, and this project is finished. It's another one of our multi-unit affordable housing projects that had new construction and historic preservation. And again, it was all about getting out ahead of the train and doing development while it was affordable, and making and ensuring that people had access to housing along the corridor. And I'm not going to read the last slide, but I'd like to show you the Stops campaign. We did a video of the telling the story of the Stops campaign. And I'm going to have my smart techie person put it up here.
Oh, I wish. Okay, and it's this one.
Yeah, Stops for us. This is when the light rail opened, June 14th.
We stand here today celebrating the impossible, the realization of an impossible dream that we could really impact this huge billion-dollar line that was planned to hopscotch our neighborhood.
This is not a case where the federal government moved the local community to do the right thing. This is a case where the local community moved the federal government to do the right thing.
It came to most of us at a level where the decision of having a light rail running down University Avenue had already been decided.
The first time I heard about the Central Corridor, I didn't know what it was. What's a Central Corridor, right?
Central Corridor is the name that they kind of gave for this light rail project, which went over the heads of most of us who lived on University Avenue.
As I became more involved with the planning process, there were a number of issues that I was really concerned about.
We saw the inequity of how the stations were parceled out along the alignment, and there being mile-long gaps in our community, whereas in other communities, they were about a half a mile. You know, folks were like, well, is this something that's just gonna fly through our community and we won't even be able to use it?
3 stations were missing. That's Western, Victoria, and Hamlin.
When you do the mapping, you can see that these were some of the most racially diverse and transit-dependent communities in the region, and they were being left behind.
Our organization was acutely aware of what the current transportation project could mean to people that had to live through I-94. Well, actually, 94 really devastated a predominantly economically viable, predominantly African-American community along Rondo. And our politicians and our officials didn't want to repeat a Rondo. I mean, I believe in my heart of hearts they did not want to do that, but they also weren't willing to push that envelope.
The motivation behind the Stops for Us campaign were basically 2 priorities. One was about greater access to transit for people who depend on transit. And then 2 was the fact that if you don't have these stations at Western, Victoria, and Hamlin, economic development was not going to happen at those areas.
The Stops for Us coalition was all about making that voice loud and clear to local elected officials, state elected officials, and federal elected officials, as well as the Met Council.
We worked various strategies. It really wasn't one silver bullet. You know, we used different tools in a toolkit.
So it was testimony, it was comments on the environmental standards.
Having to be a part of some of the planning committees.
It was going to hearings.
Finding different kinds of partnerships and resources in a philanthropic community and elsewhere that help to maximize community-based desires.
And it was taking action, you know, marches in the community, showing up at the Rondo event.
The strategy that I liked the best was going out and pestering Peter Rogoff, the FTA administrator.
We met with Rogoff in Boston, cornered him.
There was about 4 of us from the Stops Committee, and we kind of talked to him, but in that situation, a lot of people was talking to him. So the next morning, I went down to have some coffee, and Peter Rogoff was in town. And we just kind of like had this friendly conversation, which in this process, I said, well, Peter, it'd really be good for you to come and see for yourself what is really going on here.
It started what became many conversations and many discussions, not just with them, but also the leaders here in the Twin Cities, and importantly, leaders in Washington that enabled us to change our policies to get the stations added back to the project. This example here in Ramsey County really became the poster child on why we had to change what was called the cost effectiveness index. What it really did was prioritize people who were running all the way from one end of the alignment to the other. And it did not pay close enough attention to all the communities in between. And it took the community groups to bring this issue to our attention. So you need community groups that are willing to step up and really, forgive the expression, sort of get in people's face to insist that their issues get listened to. And obviously that's why we made our change in federal policy.
That was something that was going to impact all of the United States forever for all the other transportations. For us, it allowed us to get those 3 stops.
The community organizing piece from a grassroots perspective was extremely important.
Winning the Stops campaign was unbelievable and really hard for me to absorb at first because we had been working at it for so long and so hard. And it was really a moment where I felt that when the community comes together and works together, we can make things happen.
If they hadn't done all that work for years, we would have just went on and built the line as planned without incorporating those stations. It was the community group that kept that forefront, the organization, the passion, the arguments that they brought to the table about missing out on economic growth.
Now that the stops are here, we continually got to work on keeping folk in the neighborhood who want to be here.
We have to balance those sort of contradictory opportunities and challenges that the train is bringing. The first battle was to get the station, right? And then the next battle is really to ensure that the station will have a positive benefit for businesses and residents.
The biggest lesson that we've learned along the Central Corridor in this process of planning and developing and implementing the new Green Line is that the time for the discussions that we need to have is now. We need to be sitting at the table today, all of us, from whatever sectors of the community we come from. The time for community engagement is today. You know, the time for surfacing those issues is today, and the time for developing those solutions is now.
So as I said in the video, did y'all see me? Okay. So as I said in the video, that's my alarm going off telling me my 25 minutes is up. Hold on, stop. Okay, dismiss, okay. So as I said in the video, now the light rail's up and running, things that we have to be acutely on top of is what's it going to do for us in the next 5, 10, 30 years? So as Marvin talked about, some of the things, and this information is out at the back, is that land bridge over I-94. So to look at, as a part of reconciliation, reparation, and redress. So recreating and rebuilding some of that land that was lost. So I would encourage you, I think I brought enough of these, you can pick it up. And then I only brought a few of these, but this is the organization that is doing that work is Reconnect Rondo. They are an officially 501c3 now, a nonprofit that is looking at actually engaging and leading the effort to create this land bridge over I-94. And then I did bring a few of these documents, which the Urban Land Institute is actually the organization that began the process of the possibility of the land bridge over I-94. There's a few, so this tells the pre-work that they've done, just figuring out that it is possible. And it is possible, as Marvin talked about. And then, again, looking at making sure that there's benefits from the light rail. There's our, what we call Housing Opportunity Made Equitable Progress Report. So you can take that. And then one of the other things I wanted to bring out, there's also a short little paper that talks about the STOPS campaign. And one of the important things that to us, what came out of this STOPS campaign, the Environmental Protection Agency awarded 5 projects and 5 bodies of work nationally, and we were one of the cities that got that award, the Environmental Protection Agency award for equitable development and looking at protecting environmentally challenged people in neighborhoods when it comes to transportation developments. Thank you again for inviting me.